As with the Nazis, it's the Jews first, the Christians next. So we should all worry, and a warning, I'm about to show disturbing vision here, we should all worry about the new wave of terrorism to hit Israel. The Palestinians who are stabbing and running down Jews on the street and at bus stops in what's called a new intifada. And we should worry how journalists and politicians are describing what's going on. For instance, the Sydney Morning Herald blames Israel in part for the violence, for not offering a political solution, and blames it for defending itself with allegedly excessive force, shooting the attackers. Labor MP Melissa Park is even worse.
Violence has intensified in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories as Israel continues to violate international law by building settlements in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. 8 Israelis and at least 37 Palestinians have been killed so far this month, the disproportionate casualty numbers reflecting the power imbalance between the parties.
Joining me is Labor MP Michael Danby, former editor of the Australia-Israel Review and now a shadow parliamentary secretary. Michael, what's going on with Labor and Israel when Labor is getting tougher on Israel, and it's also, you've got now a Labor MP, Melissa Park, she's even attacking Israel for shooting dead terrorists?
Well, the member for Fremantle doesn't necessarily represent the Labor Party, but she also gets wrong the basic metric that's happening over there. More than 110 Israelis have been stabbed in shopping malls, in bus stations, etc. And it's very wrong to compare people with knives in their hands to people with knives in their chests. If Australian police shoot dead people in Parramatta, Dandenong and the Lint Cafe, the Australian people support it, and I think it's understandable that people who are actually attacking school buses and people standing at bus stops and in shopping malls are put out of action if they're in the violent act that they're caught in.
Like so many on the left now, not just some of your colleagues, the ABC also seems to have sided against Israel. Michael, I want to take you through one report, fairly typical, so you can perhaps give the missing background. Have a listen.
So far, dozens of Israelis and Palestinians have been killed on buses, at bus stops and at checkpoints. Just hours ago, Israeli security forces shot 2 more Palestinians after they tried to board a school bus south of Jerusalem.
Michael, the Palestinians are among the victims, according to this report. Some are just shot for trying to get into a school bus.
If Australian police shot dead someone with a machete trying to get on a school bus, trying to kill Australian children, the Australian people would overwhelmingly support them. That's exactly the same case. These were not just
And they wouldn't call them among the victims either.
They certainly would not. I've written to Lee to express my disappointment that the victims are not given any humanity in that particular program by Sophie McNeil, their activist Middle East reporter. The perpetrators are humanised with stories about one of the 16-year-old fanaticised jihadi girls who tried to stab someone at a checkpoint, but none of the victims.
No, it's weird. And what she also didn't mention was that the 2 men that were shot had in fact not just tried to get on a school bus, that stabbed a student, someone else later. The next grab, have a look at this one.
Tensions are being fuelled by the building of Jewish settlements on Palestinian land and limits on Muslim access to the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
So, according to the ABC, it's all due to tensions being stoked by Israel. True or false?
Well, Beersheba, Afula and Tel Aviv are in Israel proper. They're nothing to do with the occupied territories. It's very, very strange, if you claim occupation as the basis for doing this, that this is happening in Israel proper, apart from the fact that peace negotiations have been offered continually by Mr Netanyahu to Mr Abbas. The Israelis keep the very firm religious freedom in Jerusalem, where Jews are not even allowed to pray on the Temple Mount, and it is under the supervision of the Jordanian religious Waqf, it's called. So, you know, that kind of excuses for this behaviour is outrageous, particularly when the victims are overwhelmingly innocent civilians who are being stabbed in shopping malls, in bus stations and just standing on the street. I wish Sophie McNeil had gone and spoken to some of their families, then Australian people would understand the kind of parallels that exist exactly with Australia after Parramatta, Endeavour Hills. This is a front-of-the-mind issue, as you know, Andrew, for the Australian people too. People are afraid of jihadi terrorism, and if they understood from Sophie McNeil the real parallels that the Israelis are facing, I think they would sympathise much more with what they're going through at the moment.
But what I can't understand is why the ABC consistently fails to mention some of the incitement from the other side. It's all about Israel settlements or about, you know, oh, well, look, there's security restrictions on who goes to pray at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Nothing is mentioned about the deliberate incitement. For example, nothing is mentioned in that report, or quite consistently, with the incitement of Palestinian leaders and clerics, which has a jihadist tone, like this Gaza cleric who urged Muslims to stab the Jews, and also the incitement of the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in a speech just last month. Have a look at this one.
حيي كل ذرة دم أريقت في سبيل القدس فهي دماء نظيفة، دماء نقية، دماء في سبيل الله إن شاء الله. هذا الأقصى لنا والقيامة لنا، كلها لنا. لا يحق لهم أن يدنسوها بأقدامهم القذرة.
Jews with their filthy feet and the holy blood of the martyrs. It's like it's a parallel with Australian reporting of this, isn't it, Michael? Where you're not told, you're very rarely told that you know, some terrorist event is caused by some jihadist preaching or something. It's more about what has Australia done to marginalise these poor people.
That's exactly right, Andrew. And see what the difference is on that clip. You've got the two clips of the crazed cleric with his knife, and the so-called political leader speaking in theological and religious terms. It's a disgrace to Mr Abbas that he spoke about another people and their filthy feet in a religious sanctuary. But those two clips should have been incorporated in Ms McNeil's report on the ABC in order to give people a balance and a context, because it's the incitement that Australians are afraid of in Australia with the people doing Parramatta or Endeavour Hills or the Lint Cafe.
Exactly.
And it's the
Look,
exact parallel.
I agree with you. Israel is almost like canary in the coal mine, a metaphor. Also not mentioned, Michael, I don't understand why it's consistently overlooked by the ABC, is the shocking incitement on Palestinian TV of children directly, you know, where you get children's programs consistently. Here's a clip just from the last couple of weeks. Have a look.
طبعا إذن المجد والخلود للشهداء الأبرار، وكل التحية والصبر لعائلاتهم، والمجد للشباب الأبطال الذين ضحوا بأنفسهم كرمال القدس وأصحاب البطولات العظيمة لهم.
Looks like a whole new generation's being trained to hate and to sacrifice their lives in a struggle against Israel.
Well, as you said, the Israelis are the canary in the bottom of the coal mine. What happens there with running down people with cars was, remember what was planned for Anzac Day here in Melbourne. We know that from the transcript of the young jihadi in London who was jailed. So the parallels are very, very important for people to understand. And heaven forfend that something like this should happen in Perth or Fremantle in the future. The person who compares the victims and the perpetrators exactly is going to look very foolish, and people are going to ask lots of questions of them, and they should too. It's the more you understand about the parallels, the more the Australian people in politics like myself, and the security services are prepared to prevent it happening here in our country.
Absolutely. Look, I know it's